He didn't work there. He never signed in, and he never spoke a word. But every morning when the military museum opened its doors, he was already there, sitting on the bench beneath the SEAL operations display. Same spot. Same worn-out navies, jacket. Same silent eyes staring into the glass as if he were watching ghosts the rest of the world couldn't see. Some visitors thought he was part of the staff. Some thought he was homeless. Others just laughed quietly, nudged each other, and said things like, "Look at him. Thinks he's Rambo or something." But he didn't react. He never did. Because the uniform behind that glass hadn't just belonged to someone he knew, it had once belonged to him. Welcome to Hidden Sparks. Before we continue this emotional story, tell us in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. The museum itself wasn't grand. It was a converted hangar near the edge of town, tucked between a defunct airstrip and a faded diner that hadn't changed its menu since 1963. But inside, the place breathed memory. The air carried the weight of 100 forgotten stories, sealed in glass and shadow. Exhibits lined the walls, old uniforms, rusted weapons, black and white photos of boys who never came home. The volunteers who ran the museum were mostly veterans themselves, men with soft voices and hard hands who nodded more than they spoke. They had come to accept the presence of the old man on the bench. They didn't know his name. He never offered it. And after a while, no one asked. He was just there, a fixture like the flag that hung near the entrance or the rifle bolted to the wall. He arrived before opening and left after closing. He never touched anything. He never took a tour. He never even looked up at the plaques. He just sat beneath the SEAL exhibit, Exhibit 34. A glass case containing a preserved set of combat fatigues, a rusted combat knife, and a faded black and white photo of a group of SEALs in Vietnam. He never stared at the photo, only at the knife. His eyes locked on that blade like it still remembered the hands that had gripped it, and maybe it did. Because something in the way he sat, shoulders straight, chin level, boots aligned under the bench, felt too precise to be unconscious. It was the posture of someone trained to survive, not to be noticed. Most visitors passed him without a glance, but some stopped, and a few laughed. One group came in on a Saturday, loud, careless, 3 boys in hoodies, one holding a soda, the other filming for TikTok. No one would ever remember. "Hey, check it out," one whispered, pointing at the man. "Think he's part of the exhibit? More like part of the floor." Another chuckled. They crept closer, camera low, grinning. "Sir," one said mockingly, "can you tell us about Vietnam?" No response. "Come on, man, did you serve in World War I?" The other snorted. "Bet he's never even seen a gun." They laughed and walked off. The man didn't blink, didn't flinch, but his hands, resting calmly on his knees, tightened just. Enough for a trained eye to notice. No one else did. It was a Thursday morning, unremarkable to anyone passing by. The sun was soft over the museum parking lot. The flag out front moved just barely in the breeze, and inside, everything was as expected. Visitors came and went in quiet pairs. The docent in the front office arranged pamphlets no one ever read. Near the far end of the main hall, the old man sat exactly where he always did, on the bench beneath Exhibit 34, the Navy SEAL display. He hadn't missed a day. Same jacket, same posture, same unblinking gaze focused through the glass on the rusted combat knife. No one knew what he was thinking, but no one questioned his place anymore, either. He had become part of the museum's daily rhythm, silent, still, and strangely sacred. 2 teenagers had wandered by earlier in the week, whispering jokes behind their phones and pretending to pose beside him like he was a wax figure. One of them had muttered something like, "He thinks he's a war hero," while the other stifled a laugh and tried to film a video for the internet. A volunteer caught them and sent them on their way. But the damage wasn't in the noise they made. It was in the silence that followed. The old man didn't react. He never did. But his fingers that day had gripped the edge of the bench just a little tighter, his shoulders just a bit more rigid, and yet, even in a building built to honor memory, it seemed no one remembered him. That changed when a young man stepped through the museum doors that Thursday, quiet, composed, his head high, but without arrogance. He wore a dark navy hoodie marked with a Naval Special Warfare Training Center emblem, and carried himself like someone who had already learned that confidence and humility were not opposites, but siblings. He moved slowly through the exhibits, reading more than most, absorbing details without speaking. When he reached the sealed corridor, he paused. Something in the air changed, not for the others, but for him. At first, he was drawn to the display itself. He looked at the uniform, the gear, the aged black and white photo of 6 men shoulder to shoulder, in jungle fatigues, but then his eyes shifted, almost unconsciously, toward the bench beside the case. There sat the old man, back straight, knees squared, eyes locked forward. It was the tattoo that made the recruit stop cold, faint but unmistakable. It curved out from beneath the man's left sleeve. It wasn't a Navy emblem or a patriotic flag. It was something far more specific, an old symbol known only to a few. A coiled serpent wrapped around a trident, its head poised like it was ready to strike. The young man had seen it once before, on the arm of an instructor who told him, with a rare hint of reverence, that only one man had worn it first, and he was looking at him. The recruit stepped forward carefully, without trying to intrude. He stood near the bench, hands behind his back, and after a long pause said quietly, "Sir, was that your knife in the case?" The old man didn't answer. His eyes remained forward. The recruit tried again, this time more softly. "I recognized." "That tattoo, sir? My instructor? He told us about someone who carried that mark long before anyone else did." Still no response. But something had changed. The air had thickened. The silence had meaning. Slowly, the old man turned his head. His eyes met the recruit's, not with challenge, but with measurement. He studied him, then finally spoke, his voice deep, worn, and slow. I trained that boy before he ever saw a parachute." The recruit didn't smile. He simply nodded, his eyes wide, locked in place. He didn't need to ask more questions. He already knew the answer. He had heard the stories about a man who taught without shouting, who led without medals, who vanished after Vietnam without explanation. They stood in silence for a moment, side by side, looking into the case. The old man's gaze dropped to the knife. "They got the description wrong," he muttered. "That one didn't come back with me. I carried it all the way through Da Nang." The recruit stayed still. Then from his pocket he pulled a folded slippy of paper. It wasn't a printed form or a museum brochure, but a handwritten note. Just a name, a number, and a small embossed seal insignia at the bottom. He placed it carefully on the bench beside the old man and said, "They're looking for instructors again. Quiet ones, ones who remember. No ceremony, no handshake, no dramatic music. Just one man leaving a door open for another." The old man looked at the paper but didn't touch it. He watched the recruit walk away, down the corridor, past the tanks and medals and newspaper clippings. Only after the room was empty again did he reach out, place his hand gently on the note, and hold it there for a long while, long enough for the past to rise quietly from the glass and sit beside him once more. The old man didn't return the next day, nor the day after. For the first time in months, maybe years, his usual place on the bench sat empty. The volunteers noticed. So did the custodian, but no one said anything. The museum carried on as usual. Visitors walked by the seal exhibit. The knife sat in its case. The uniform remained still, and the ghost that used to sit beneath it was gone until Saturday. Shortly after noon, 2 black SUVs pulled up outside the front entrance. They didn't block traffic, no lights, no flags, just clean vehicles, tinted windows, and quiet purpose. The first to step out was the young SEAL recruit. This time, he wore full-dress uniform, pressed, polished, precise. Behind him came two, officers in navy blues. One held a small folder, the other scanned the room and nodded to the museum's director without saying a word. Then, in the final SUV, the old man stepped out. He wore the same jacket, same boots, same silent posture, but something in the way he moved felt different now, less like a relic, more like a soldier walking toward something he didn't think he'd ever face again. The young recruit met him at the doors, opened them, without a word, and escorted him back into the corridor he used to haunt like clockwork. No other visitors were inside. The museum had quietly cleared the area. Standing in front of the SEAL exhibit, the older officer with the folder stepped forward and spoke directly to the old man. "Sir, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Commander Blake. I was told you. Once trained under Operation Phantom Echo," the old man gave a nod. Slow, not proud, just honest. Blake continued, "Then you're not a visitor here. You're part of our foundation. We've reviewed your field records, your debriefs, and the handwritten field manual still used at Coronado." He opened the folder and turned it toward him. Inside were old scanned documents, a faded photo of a team in Vietnam, and a signature that matched the name on the knife in the case. "We never meant to forget you," Blake said. "We just didn't know where to find you." The old man didn't look at the papers. He looked at the recruit. "You asked if I still train," he said, the gravel in his voice softer now. "I don't." The recruit didn't flinch. He simply nodded. Then Blake spoke again. "We're not asking for lectures. We're asking for presence, for your eyes, for your silence in the back of the room, because some of these kids think toughness is loud, and you, just by sitting, teach more than any of us do shouting." The old man's jaw didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted. His hand reached up to adjust his collar. He glanced at the exhibit behind the glass, where his own photo sat next to the uniform he had once worn through jungle and ash. "Keep the knife," he said quietly, "but I want my bench back." The officers looked at each other, then nodded in unison. The recruit cracked a half smile, and for the first time, the man known only as the old guy in the museum took a step, not away from the past, but directly back into it. 3 weeks later, the bench was no longer empty, but this time it wasn't at the museum. It was at a private training facility deep inside a SEAL compound, in a room most people didn't even know existed. No signs, no open doors, no plaques on the wall, just steel, sand, and silence. The old man sat in the back of the room, alone, hands resting gently on his knees, eyes fixed not on a display case now, but on a group of young candidates dragging a stretcher across a field of gravel. He didn't speak, he didn't instruct, he just watched, and somehow they moved better because of it. He had no rank, no orders, no formal title. But when he entered the room, the instructors stood up, not because they were told to, but because something about him made it automatic. When he passed by the recruits, they didn't ask who he was. They just nodded and cleared a path. Those who had been told already knew. The others would find out soon enough. His presence didn't come with fanfare. He didn't wear a badge or a nameplate. But in every quiet moment, between drills, during stretches, before lights out, you'd see the new generation glance toward him. Not to be seen, but to remember he was watching. Back at the museum, the SEAL exhibit remained unchanged. The knife stayed in its case. The photo, the uniform, the dusty plaque, all untouched. But next to the bench where the old man used to sit, someone had quietly placed a new inscription, engraved in brass. It didn't say "in memory of." It didn't give a date. It simply read, "Instructor Ghost, SEAL." Nothing more was needed, and as for the old man, he never once asked for thanks. He didn't want applause. What he wanted, more than anything else, was to make sure the next generation carried something deeper than pride, something older than war stories, something forged in silence, tested by time, and passed down without ever being named, and now, finally, he was. This story was brought to you by Hidden Sparks. Some men don't wear their legacy on their chest. Some carry it in silence, in scars, in the way they walk through a room without needing to be seen. And sometimes all it takes is one person, one recruit, one glance, to remind the world that legends don't retire. They wait to be remembered now. Let us ask you, have you ever met someone who looked like no one until you found out who they really were? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these memories alive. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.